This is one of our Taco Tuesday events. Our workshop is the authentic leadership, vulnerability, empathy, and compassion, the EQ advantage. And so first, again, I want to welcome you all, and we're going to go over some housekeeping rules. As you might have seen right now, this session is being recorded, so we will be sharing the recording after the event concludes, probably sending it out tomorrow. I do want to ask if we can please keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking. And then also you are welcome to use the chat box throughout the presentation. And like most of our events that we host at Cal Poly Pomona, we do a land acknowledgement. And so I want to go ahead and start that off. Is we want to recognize the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the original caretakers of this land. We are grateful to work as guests here in what is today Los Angeles County, the traditional, ancestral, and ascended territories of the Gabrielino Tongva. We ask that we each tread lightly, humbly, and with open hearts. We pay our respects to the Gabrielino Tongva people, our ancestors, elders, and all of our relations, past, present, and emerging. If you want to go ahead and take scan the QR code to look up the original caretakers of the land you are currently on and in places you lived at, or you can definitely use or text the number that's available there. And with that, I want to go ahead and introduce Carlos Casados. Carlos is an executive trainer, development consultant, and mindset coach based in Southern California. He works with groups and individuals all over the globe. In his work, he prefers to focus on the areas of strategic communication, conflict resolution, holistic wellness, and leadership. Carlos has his own podcast called The Tendencies Show and has been featured in viral documentary films, The Enlightenment and Amazon Prime's Destination series, as well as in Los Angeles and Orange County travel magazines. He fails to inspire work with creative groups and individuals, sharing the most effective mind hacks and methods for cultivating resilience and problem-solving skills. With the time he spends with us, he aims to help you discover your inner resource, transfer problems into solutions, and help you to become the best version of yourself. He is continued to helping you be ready to meet any and all challenges with renewed focus and courage. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Carlos. Thank you again for joining us.
Wow. Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that. And I want to thank everyone else that's here as well, just for your time and for your open ear, open heart, hopefully. I aim to share some things with you that are from my own experiences, as well as the experience of some heavy hitters out there, some people that have done some really great things in the world. Excuse me for a moment, there's some kind of notification here. Okay, looks like we're good. So I want to let everyone know that I invite your questions and I invite your feedback. So to that end, I'm going to be giving you a presentation using a Google Slides presentation. If there's something that's burning inside of you that you need to ask, I want you to know that you can ask that, but just think about whether it's something that's relevant to the current thing I'm speaking of. And if not, I still want to hear from you, but maybe it might be something I'd ask you to wait until the end. So if you've got it, I suggest writing it down. You can even write it in the chat box so that you can remember it. And I will attempt to get to those questions as quickly as possible. And without further ado, I want to begin my slide. So I'm going to share the screen here. All right. So up on the upper left, you'll see a logo for my podcast, which is the Authenticity Show. And we chose that logo because it's gold. It's literally the periodic table. Many of you will recognize the periodic table for gold. We really feel that authenticity is the gold, the most important thing. You know, it's the thing that brings the value in any kind of a relationship. And so the show's focused on that. And during this talk that I'm giving today, I'm going to focus a lot on the things that I think are important about authenticity and why we need it. We need more of it. Why people are aching and yearning to have it more in their life, and how many people don't know how to develop it. So, uneasy is the head that wears the crown. This is obviously from Henry IV, Shakespeare. Many people feel the weight of leadership. They feel the pressure and the the stress of, oh my God, I've got all this responsibility on me, and this can happen to any of us. So leadership itself can be a heavy burden, but the other end of that is that there's a lot of reward for it. This is why people do it. I myself own my own business, and I have my creative ventures like the podcast and a few other things that I do. And there's always that risk of failure, isn't there? So the question that I have always in a situation like that is, how can I transform the thing that's difficult? And there are some specific things that I do. Rule number one is realizing that vulnerability, pardon me, my slideshow is being a little weird. Okay, vulnerability equals invulnerability. This comes from a friend of mine named John that we interviewed, who really likes to say things that are provocative. And he's a great example of somebody who dives into his communications with people. He's an executive coach also. But what I admire about him and what I find appealing is that he's constantly digging deep inside of himself for those things that he can share, which are teaching tools. They not only are offering him the chance to improve upon his own style, his own success, his own being, but in sharing it openly, he creates the opportunity for people to learn from that moment, in the moment, not as some kind of anecdote that they read later or something like that, but right in the moment. So it's quite beautiful. I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they think that's just ridiculous. How can vulnerability be invulnerability, right? But from acknowledging what is, that's really the beginning of changing the problem. When you truly understand what the problem is, in other words, you grasp the boundary conditions that the problem is presenting, only then can you realize what's outside of those boundary conditions. When we start to admit our feelings, the people that we're connecting with will automatically feel a deeper connection. And connection is based on that trust and their ability to relate. If you want to be strong, if you want to really be strong, it's not by posturing. It's about learning that change is the thing that we can expect. Things are constantly changing. And if we don't adapt to them, we will suffer big time. So being able to see your weakest link through rigorous honesty allows you to do something about it. Now, before I get into these principles, I want to say that all throughout my life, I've had moments where my own skill level, my own talents were honed, and I had reached what I might call like a new level, a new layer of skill. And along the way, of course, there are people who acknowledge that, people who say things, compliment me, admire those qualities. And I want to be honest with all of you that I feel uncomfortable with that sometimes. I am very harsh on myself when it comes to my own criticism sometimes. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in this virtual room who can probably relate. The thing is, I'm admitting this to you because if I'm not actually living by these ideas, then who am I to even talk to you about it? You see, I don't think that we have to be perfect in order to be able to share what we have. And as you grow into your own leadership style and discover, we're going to talk about leadership styles in a little bit. Part of that is about honesty. And I don't mean dumping. I don't mean sharing every last detail. I mean, asking yourself what's relevant, knowing that it's okay to share when you fail. It's okay to share your feelings of concern and worry. It's okay to share that you're lost and you don't know what to do sometimes. It sounds like bad advice. How is the leader supposed to be saying they don't know what to do? But there are going to be times where you're in a leadership position and you actually don't know what to do. And if you pretend, people will feel that. It's a lot easier to share that load when you give people the honesty and the vulnerability that you can give them, because then they can step it up and they can relate to it. They can resonate with the times that they've felt that very same way. And then you're inviting a sort of crowdsourced empowerment. You're sharing some of that mantle, and people will still admire you. In fact, they'll probably admire you deeper. So these are some principles that I found along the way that were helpful. We know that vulnerability is invulnerability, but why? Well, first of all, we have to admit our failures. Failure is indeed the kind of feedback that we get from whatever results we're getting. And it tells us how to navigate. It tells us, okay, that didn't work. Okay, the military has an after action review. They say things like, all right, before we go any further, we've just finished our operation. What went well? Let's acknowledge what went well. Secondly, what didn't go so well? In other words, what stretches do we need to do? What did we miss? And then the third thing they ask very often is, okay, we've got what we did well, and we've got what we didn't do so well. Where do we go from there? Where do we go from here? What's the next step? So failure is feedback. Failure is also research. If you imagine yourself having a white lab coat, and everything that you're doing when you are an entrepreneur, or if you're starting a business, or if you're in a leadership role at the job that you do, the mistakes you make along the way, if you're paying attention, they become like gold. They're little nuggets that you can take away with you, and super important. If you're failing, it also means that you are taking risks. It means you're pushing yourself beyond what you're normally comfortable with. Okay, sometimes people will say, maybe many of us have seen that Venn diagram where there's your comfort, and then there's like what you want, and then there's like, in the middle is this discomfort, this place where what you want is really in the place where you're not comfortable, and so you have to move beyond your comfort zone into that space. And I'd like to say that there's another way of looking at it beyond everything you want is in your discomfort. I want to say that you can also decide to become more comfortable. It's all in how you frame it. So that narrative that it's uncomfortable, who wants to be uncomfortable? No one. But if you can start to embrace that life includes comfort and discomfort, and you can step into the empowered narrative, the narrative that says, I get to decide what I'm comfortable with. And I can start to stretch my comfort, to expand my comfort, and start to move into things that I haven't done yet. And so it is true that we have to get beyond what we're used to in order to get what we haven't had. Duh, right? So if you've failed, remember that instead of beating yourself up, it means that you've taken risks. And so there's a certain amount of a pat on the back that you deserve for even doing that. And if you take the appropriate risks, it's the only way to get the rewards that you want. So it builds character and resilience. Anyone who has read, a biography of someone like Richard Branson or Elon Musk will also see that failure is a very big part of who they are. It's in fact what they eat for breakfast, if you will. It's the thing that they use to make themselves better. I mean, Virgin Cola, anyone? That did not do so well. But Richard Branson is extremely successful, nonetheless. Have you ever heard the term imposter syndrome? Well, here's the thing. It was originally called imposter phenomenon, and imposter syndrome, as it is now called, is commonly understood as a false and sometimes crippling belief that one's successes are the product of luck or fraud rather than skill. Now, that's how Merriam-Webster defines it. And I'll admit again to you that there have been many times in my life when I've had to step into a role, and to a large extent, it felt like I was pretending. That's not a comfortable feeling for most of us. However, it's absolutely normal in some ways, partly because of the way we've been trained to think. And I'm going to show you why. Feeling insecure is a normal thing when you're doing something you haven't done. It doesn't mean that you can't feel confident also learning a new thing, but some insecurity is probably healthy to have at least an awareness that things could go wrong. We are well adapted on an evolutionary biology level to remember the negative things just as much as shooting for the positive. If we don't think about what could possibly go wrong, we won't be prepared for the problems that could occur. And of course, you can never prepare for everything or every eventuality. It's not possible to do that. However, if we keep our eye fixed on the goal, thinking positively about what we're capable of doing, and we are also aware of the things that could go wrong and our own personal failings and challenges, weaknesses, etc. If we can hold both of those images together and still look towards that positive image and still aim for that, utilizing what we've learned from the negative, then that's one of the recipes we have for success. Because if we only looked at what was negative, if we only scared the holy hell out of ourselves by thinking about what could go wrong, then we'll never take risks. And if we only thought about what could go right, well, then we'll walk forward a Dunning-Kruger effect example of essentially getting ourselves in a lot of trouble and not knowing how to get ourselves out of it. So the key is to keep both of those things ahead of you, where you can see it. Someone, I don't remember who said it, but they said, keep your eye on those two wolves, but keep going forward. Remember that you don't need to feel like you're an imposter. You don't have to feel that way. It's not necessary. It's okay if it happens, but you shouldn't feel obligated to feel that way. Remember that you can step out of it. The narratives inside of your own mind are really yours, but in a way they aren't. What I mean by that is we've gotten used to thinking of them as our own, but where did you learn it? I mean, did you pop out of the womb with this idea that somehow you were a fake? Probably not. When you ask yourself about a negative feeling that's affecting the way you're leading or the way you're doing business, it's a good idea to stop and actually ask yourself, where's this coming from? Chances are you may have had it for quite some time, but it isn't something that originated from you. You may not remember, but we learn things from our environment, from our parents and from our teachers, coaches, peers, and so on. And these things start to become repeated in our own minds, and we carry those things and start to make them our own. They become part of our narrative, part of our story. Well, every new situation you get into, you are carrying with you a story, and that story affects your experience. In every bad occurrence, you're always there. So there has to be a relationship, right? It's not as random as we might think. We are always bringing ourselves into every situation. We don't technically see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, and we bring that everywhere with us. So one thing we can do right now is make a concerted effort to just examine that. Stop investing in the energy of that narrative. So if you continually describe it over and over and over again and continually complain and you're looping that commentary, then you are contributing energy to a feeling. And that feeling is going to change the way you behave, because feelings are at the root of the actions that we take. They motivate our behaviors. So it's hugely important that you as a leader step into that self-control to begin examining and rewriting that story for yourself. It's not easy and it doesn't happen overnight, but I'm telling you right now, if you start, you will see changes fairly quickly. What's the idea behind it sometimes is the idea that we don't want to be arrogant. And that can be confused with the idea that we should diminish ourselves in some way. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when I say control the narrative, but there may be something of value to asking yourselves, who are you and what could you still learn and what value do you hold and all those things. Those are very useful questions for introspective reasons, and they develop your character. Humility and insecurity are just part and parcel to growing any business. If you're starting something and you're scared, don't think that you're alone. It's not a unique experience. Most people have that. If you're starting a project and reaching beyond what you're used to, it's going to require you to step it up, to expand. We always have to stretch ourselves in order to grow. So did you know that Clance and co-author Joe Langford acknowledged this in 1993 article, in the journal Psychotherapy. The imposter phenomenon was originally thought to be a particularly pervasive among females. Surveys of several populations, however, have found no differences between the sexes in the degree to which they experience imposter feelings. So you can just let that ship sail. A lot of that was a narrative that was coming in and having to do with a really one-sided way of looking at it. It was a disempowering way of looking at it. It's important, especially in this day and age, to begin with a clean slate. So we've been dragging this idea of imposter syndrome with us. Even the word syndrome itself implies that it's some kind of medical or psychiatric situation, and it isn't. It's an idea that came into our culture from this pop psychology kind of level, and it's caused a meme-like virus in the mind. If you understand what I mean by that, it's an idea that catches and replicates itself, and then when people watch you do it, then they start to imitate it as well, and it's just not necessary. So the best policy is just let it go. Famed lecturer Brené Brown said, the only way for us to have connection is to be really seen, and shame prevents us. It's universal. Everyone has this. The only people who don't have it are people incapable of human empathy or connection. No one wants to talk about it, and the less you talk about it, the more you have it. Do you think that it feels good to share that I feel insecure, or to share that I don't know the answers, or to share that I can't do it by myself, or to share that I don't feel resourceful enough, or that I need more than I have? Do any of those things feel good to share? No. We've learned to become, to respond to things like that with shame. And it's very common. But when you hear someone else doing that, I'm wondering if you feel connection to that person. I'm wondering if when you hear things like that, there's a part of you, especially if it's someone that you care for, there's a part of you that begins to empathize. And as you are empathizing, are you not relating with who they are? asking yourself, wow, I've been there. I mean, how many people will say that in response? Hey, I've been there before. It's going to be all right. You start to say the things that you wish you would heard, you start to say the things that you wish you would have heard in those moments when you felt the exact same way. That only happens because there's a relatability in that. So instead of thinking that it's something to be afraid of and to hold back, maybe it's time to start rethinking that. So, are you able to let go of what you think you should be in favor of who you actually are? This is truly who you need to be, because without it, you can't cultivate a genuine connection. And guess what, guys? Connection is what sells. Connection is what grows a company. Connection is what gets people to spread the word about what you do or what you have. If it's a movement, if it's a business, it's the same thing. How do you know what style of leader to be in every situation? I'm going to share some things about leadership types. They're just 3 basic categories that I'm going to share about that will help you to know how to position yourself and how to think about yourself in relation to the leadership of other people. So, the first type, and these are drawn from occupational therapy, the first type is called the directive leader. A directive leader is someone who is absolutely in charge, someone who tells you exactly what to do. They're essentially giving orders. Now, you'll see great examples of this in the military, but you'll also see this in situations where the populace is either unskilled or incapable of handling those things by themselves. So in cases where you're in a convalescent home, for example, or handling children, there is a very huge disparity between the skill level and the understanding and the empowerment of the people who are leading and the people who are following. So in a case like that, being a directive kind of a leader is necessary. But imagine being a directive leader in a situation where people are relatively competent and independent-minded. How that becomes frustrating, irritating, and it starts getting old. You get those people who are just waiting. They got their time card in their hand. They're just waiting to shove it into the clock and get out of there so they can just get their paycheck. They can't wait to get paid, not because they enjoy what they're going to do with the money, but because they just desperately need the reward for the feeling of effort they've been making, holding their lips closed, not wanting to say or preventing themselves from saying what they really want to say. The facilitative leader is different. When you have some skills in the environment that you're teaching, when you've got people who have a certain level of competence, you can give them some of the authority. In fact, it's important that you do give some of that authority so that you're not doing everything yourself. It's a lot of work being a directive leader. It's a lot of focus on you. And if you have a sick day, well, everything goes to hell. But a facilitative leader is someone who understands that there are people out there in the group that have skills and could potentially be leaders of their own circumstance, leaders of their own departments, leaders of their own projects. So a facilitative leader starts to focus on more of a we rather than me mindset. They start to really disperse some of that power out to the group. And the advantage of this is you get to do a lot more and you get a lot more group sourced ideas solving problems. So it's beneficial. You'll see this a lot in Good Friends, and you'll see it a lot with people who are doing leadership trainings, things like that. Finally, there's the advisory leader. Now, an advisory leader is pretty laissez-faire. I mean, the advisory leader takes a backseat role and is absolutely more of a mentor than anything else. There's some of some of the situations where you use an advisory leadership role would be where you basically have things going, you're running the ship, but you need some advice. You need a little bit of coaching around something to help you get through a problem where you're stuck. So the advisory leader is even more in that role of friendship, in the sense that rather than telling a person what to do, there's more of a Socratic questioning method happening, asking, well, what is that you're looking to do, and what's in the way, and what's preventing you in the moment, and what resources do you have to solve that, and what haven't you tried yet? They're asking questions to get you to find that answer yourself, because they essentially believe in you. The mantle is given to you, the mantle of authority, but the advisor is still respected, and that's a role where there's just very little touch going on, just a light touch. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "A good leader inspires people to have confidence in the leader. A great leader inspires people to have confidence in themselves." Authenticity starts by exploring who you really are rather than who you think you should be. Rigorous self-assessment, rigorous self-honesty, a clear view of who you are. It evolves with that rigorous self-honesty and the willingness to accept honest feedback from those you trust. I'm going to tell you right now that if you don't have a peer group, then please do everything you can to get one. Not everyone has been blessed with people they've known for 42 years like I have. I have close knit friends who we've stayed bonded all this time, and they have no problem telling me when they think I'm out of line, and they have no problem setting me straight. And I invite it because it's character building. But if you don't have that, there are solutions to that. You can get a coach, you can get a mentor, you can join a mentorship programming, you can join B2B business groups where you're getting feedback from other business folks out there. So there are options for this. There are university professors who would mentor you. It reaches its peak by realizing that you're a self-authoring being, actualizing your deepest dreams, even if you have to embrace your weaknesses and your failings in order to do so. Here's what's important about that. Authenticity doesn't just mean being honest and genuine. Authenticity also means developing yourself into a person who is self-authoring. I mentioned earlier about the narratives that you control. When you truly are in control of those narratives, or at least that's the predominant way that you lead your life, that you decide for you what things mean. In this place, you are beginning to become more self-authoring. And your life isn't dependent on whether someone else says it's okay or whether someone else has already done it. You're doing it sheerly because it's an expression of your core nature to want to explore and to become whatever it is you feel inclined to. So that's hugely important for understanding authenticity. Another quote from Simon Sinek here, who I really enjoy listening to. There are leaders, and then there are those who lead. Leaders hold power, while those who lead inspire us. Follow them. They follow them because, we follow them because we don't follow them because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. It's those that start with why who have the ability to inspire those around them or to find others who inspire them. So aside from that, getting tongue twisted there, to know your why means that you understand what's motivating the choices that you're making. There's a lot of focus these days on what and how, and he talks about this as his golden circle. They kind of approach things backwards. They try to amass all of the manpower, the technology, the designs, and so on, instead of deeply going into what's driving the action itself. Why do I even want this? Why am I different? Why must I achieve this particular thing? If I don't go deep down into that emotional layer myself, how can I then inspire other people to feel inclined to do it? Some people do like to ask a lot of what questions, how we and how questions. But there's a why driving that. Perhaps it's the idea that for them, the why is knowing that there's a way to do it. But for a lot of people, the why is the way. In other words, it drives them deep inside to access their core, to access what they really feel deep inside, and they begin to empathize with the other person who feels the same way. And of course, that person is going to spread the message. Of course, that person is going to put in those extra hours. They're going to search for how and for what, because they know why they're doing it. My tip here is just always start with why. Details of what or even how come after your purpose is clear, because emotions drive behavior. My dear friend, co-host of the Authenticity Show that I'm part of, and one of my best friends, said, strive to be worthy of your dog's love. And I thought that that's extremely useful. It's not all the things that you do, but it's the quality of who you are that does this. So I want to thank all of you for being here. And I want to open this up now. I'm going to stop sharing and open this up for questions because I feel like we have a lot to talk about here. So just one moment. Okay. And before we begin that, I want to just make a point of clarity with you. In the title of this talk that was sent out, we talked about empathy and compassion. Now, if I don't define what I mean by that, it's easy to get confused. First of all, empathy is our capacity to sense that or imagine that we are feeling what another person feels. If we feel the capacity to feel that empathy, that's a good sign. It means that we're a functional human being. We're not a psychopath or a narcissist or a sociopath. But we all know people who are so empathic that they have a hard time getting things done, and they get overwhelmed by crowds, and they have a real difficulty sorting through things when you're having a disagreement with them. They have difficulty staying in their present self, and instead they slip out of their personal awareness into the belief that they're feeling what the other person's feeling, and it's almost as if they're trying to mind read you the whole time. And you may have been in a position where something happened to you and you needed help, but the other person was so overwhelmed by what they witnessed, they were unable to help you. So in a way, empathy can be overemphasized. If someone falls into the well and I say, oh gosh, they've fallen into the well, I wonder what that's like. How can I help them? And instead they just jump into the well to see what that's like, and they break their ankle. Now you have two people who are both suffering, in pain, and stuck in a well. How relieved will that first person who fell into the well be when the second person jumps in and breaks their leg? Probably not very much. So empathy is overrated. Oftentimes it disables our ability to really take care of someone. And I'm not suggesting that we don't feel. What I'm suggesting is we do something different. I'm suggesting that we convert, we transform, we elevate that empathy into something called compassion. And compassion is also a very misunderstood thing. Many people just trade the word empathy for compassion and don't realize that they're very different. My understanding of compassion is a little bit more nuanced than that. For me, compassion is as if it's a higher octave of that same note, okay? It's the capacity to empathize, but the choice to stay in a present state of awareness where you are capable of truly assisting that person. It's having an understanding that that person has reasons for feeling the way they do and for being in the circumstances they are in. It's the capacity to say, yes, I can understand how a person might have gone there or might have had that happen. And it's simultaneously a desire to help. It's a feeling of care. I want to help this person. I'm going to do what I need to help this person. And there's another important element to compassion. When you're feeling compassion, you aren't harmed by being in difficult situations. In a truly compassionate state of mind, it acts as a buffer to your inner feelings. It allows you to feel safe, connected, clear, and centered, while still having a positive intent and a willingness to help. As a leader, if one of your employees or co-workers has a problem, if you drop too far into empathy, it would effectively prevent you from making choices that would be good for the business. And it could potentially prevent you from making choices that are good for that person in the long run. In a way, it might be even disempowering to them. However, by focusing on developing compassion, by being clear about what that really means, we can see the circumstances and care about that person as an individual and as a human being and as a member of the team, even as a friend or colleague. But it still allows us to make the choice about what will help them, what will serve the greater need, what will actually be a win-win for both of you, and how you will show up for them will be appreciated in an even deeper way by that person. So we can conduct ourselves as leaders with compassion, with vulnerability, and we can even recognize our own empathy, and that can enhance our relatability, our capacity to connect with our audience, with our customers, and with our employees. And in general, it will develop the skills that a true leader really needs in order to inspire people rather than simply telling them what to do or being a power grabber. In this world, if we look around at what's been going on more and more over the past, say, 50 years, it's going to become extremely crucial, really relevant, that we begin to elevate our own understanding. We ask ourselves to step it up and become deeper, clearer, and more powerful leaders so that we can make the effects in the world that we really want to see. That famous quote, I think it might have been, I don't actually, you know what, I'm not going to misquote. I don't know who it was, but be the change you want to see in the world is the quote that I want to say. Most of us have heard that. This is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to start to be that change in the world and to really embrace who you are authentically and develop it into who you really want to be. So now I'm going to open up the floor. I thank you for listening, and I want to leave some adequate time and room for people to ask questions. So let's have it.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I'll go ahead and if you raise your hand, I'll go ahead and you can go ahead and unmute yourself. So the first question, it looks like it's coming from Zane. Go ahead.
Oh, Carlos.
Hi, Zane.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking today. It was really inspiring. Something I thought about, I actually have like my own podcast too about resiliency and stuff. I'm really curious on what your take is on that and your advice on someone who has to be resilient to survive, and also just how to get through tough times like now. Or, I mean, tough times are happening all the time. I feel like collectively we've been experiencing a tough time together. I'm just curious what your take is on that.
Okay, yeah. So resilience is huge right now. It's a topic that I think is so important. So I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, what I just said about empathy, if we are not guarding ourselves from sliding into empathy unconsciously, it will drain us and it will reduce the vitality that we feel in order to spring back, because resiliency is the ability to spring back. So when I mentioned failure, If you're drained by being too empathic all the time and you're not caring for oneself, and then you fail, picking yourself up by the bootstraps and starting again and actually going for it after that failure becomes a Herculean task. So the energy to spring back from a situation like that comes from guarding yourself in these ways, being careful about how you're expending your energy. That includes things like empathy. It also includes carving out time for you to manage the pillars of health, sleep, exercise, adequate rest, creative acts, enjoyment, things that regenerate you. So if you want to become more resilient, that's part of it. And the other part that I think is important is having an attitude shift. If we reframe stress, for example, as potentially a friend rather than an enemy, if we take the belief that stress is going to kill us and destroy us, and we change that belief into stress can actually signal our central nervous system to become more active. It can generate a stronger heartbeat and a stronger flow of blood through our system. It can help us to become more alert. It can hone us to be a sharper, stronger, more powerful being. If we take that attitude as we're experiencing a stressful experience, that stress will have a totally different effect on us. It will actually put the fire under the butt and get us going. It'll get us off our seats and into action. And it will make us more proactive rather than reactive. And I have a lot more to say about that, but I don't want to take the whole time on that. And I really thank you for your question. That was an excellent question.
Thank you so much for that question, Zane. We have Jocelyn next, and then we'll have Paola. So go ahead, Jocelyn.
Wonderful. Hi, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much for being here today. It was really insightful. And I just wanted to know, I'm currently a climate associate for Alameda County and focusing on climate change and environmental justice. And how would we, dealing with not only colleagues, kind of any of the issues or complex things they may be having, as well as such a big burden as, climate change and such a monumental issue. How do you balance dealing with, colleagues as well as something as huge as climate change and things like that? And how do you not let it burden yourself to maintain being that leader? Like I do try to be as optimistic as I can and just keep pushing through because, just
thank you.
Self,
Thank you for doing
be
that.
that way. Yeah, that doesn't really help anything, but I want to know if you have any other advice or tips on how to maintain that balance and kind of keep persevere in a way, and just work through those challenges.
That's great. Now I'm going to mind read a little bit that the challenge might be getting people to feel that it's important. Is that one of the challenges that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I feel that it's important, as well as just working with even your own self. Yeah.
Okay. Well, for starters, getting people to feel that it's more important when they don't is a challenge, right? So how do we address a challenge? And this is going to apply to a lot of things right now in this current state we're in. There's a lot of polarizing going on. There's a lot of anger and a lot of dehumanizing and ad hominem attacks on people and things like that. It's really terrible, awful. So what's missing is a lot of that humane, kind, compassionate aspect. But you can't just convince people to be compassionate. You have to provoke it, invoke it in yourself, and you have to inspire that. So one of the back doors or side doors into that is by asking really quality questions and being truly interested. So the development of your own compassionate listening skills and applying them in each situation and not being in a rush, even though it feels like, it's imminent. And, if we don't do something now, everything's going to go to hell and a handbasket. That may be true. It also isn't the most resourceful way to behave or to make decisions. If you want to access the best parts of your brain, for example, you can't be in fight or flight. And if stress is attacking you, you need to remember that you're activating the wrong place in order to make decisions. That fight and flight amygdala part of your brain is there to protect you when there's an immediate threat, a literal immediate threat, like there's a bus coming at you or a lion attacking you. That's immediate. Climate change is extremely, it's an impending, massively impending problem, right? However, in this very moment, we're still alive. So in this moment, you could say that it's not technically immediate. It just feels immediate. And if we don't do something about it, like right away, we're not going to have the leverage we need in order to get those things to happen. So we just have to understand the psychology and the biology of that. Getting people to hear you and understand it starts with you. Managing your own feelings of threat, your own feelings of defensiveness, your own feelings of fear, which then prompt angry responses. And then, of course, that other person's mirror neurons begin to activate. And then it's like a ping pong ball going back and forth on a table. It's not really stopping the game. We want to stop the game, find out more about it. Even though it might be the opposite point of view than you hold, ask as though you're a curious, radio anchorman or something like that. And you're trying to get the news from that person. And the more you understand, and the more you start to look at why they feel the way they feel, the more you're letting them empty out, the more you're understanding what might be motivating those beliefs, the easier it will be for you then to offer something laterally that they could also agree with. And that's your doorway. That's your persuasive doorway for them to start going, I guess she makes a point there. I never thought of it that way. And a little tipping point begins to happen. So I hope that's helpful. Being persuasive in situations like that and handling the stress of those situations is really hard. And I admire you for, dealing with that. But that is one way to begin doing that. It takes a lot of practice, but the principle is ask more questions. Remember that you need to be in a resourceful place. So do whatever you have to do. I don't care if it means looking at a darn cat video on the phone, but break your state of mind away from the stress point and onto something more happy, inspiring. Think about someone you love. Get a hug if you're at home. Do the things that you know are self-soothing and taking care of you. Take a break, walk away. All those things that people say, count to 10, all those things to break up the neuropsychology of that situation. So you start to step into a more, resourceful place where your cerebral cortex can really start to chew on it and come up with a better solution, because the amygdala is only designed for very simple, almost oversimplified answers: fight and flight and freeze. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great. Thank you. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
And Paola.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. So I work with children, and you were talking about how empathy is like very important, but it can also kind of impede you. And one thing that's been brought up in my work was kind of like boundary setting. So I wanted to know like kind of what was your take on that, and kind of like what is one advice you would give for somebody who may have not been able to set boundaries before? Because that's what the talk has kind of sounds like when you were bringing up compassion and kind of like trying to keep yourself like still be able to feel the emotions the other person might be feeling, but in a way trying to keep yourself present so that you can help the other person.
Great. Another very layered question, but I appreciate it. And I'm going to do my best to give you as simple of an answer as I can. But by no means is it complete. First of all, people have different perceptual positions that they think from. There's a position that's kind of like the first person voice in English grammar, right? This is the I, where we're imagining everything from how we are. Like we're looking out of our eyes, we're hearing from our ears, we're feeling all of our emotions and our tactile things. And when we refer to ourselves, myself, really, actually, if I say I, there's a feeling of being centered in that. And sometimes when people say I, there's a part of them that isn't quite centered in themselves. And that requires a little bit of imagining and playing with it, because if you can contrast that with you, like imagining that you are, like closing your eyes and imagining that you are that person for 5 minutes. If a person cannot do that, if they have difficulty doing that, or if they do it too easily, these are all indicators that the difference between like me and you, us and them, aren't as clear as they could be. And it's very hard to have boundaries if mentally those boundaries are very slippery and they're just sliding around between using pronoun, that their pronoun usage starts to switch. You know, when someone's talking to you and they say you rather than I when they mean I. You probably heard that before. Listen for it if you haven't. Start listening now, because believe me, you'll run into people who do this. That's a sign of somebody who's kind of got a slippery sense of where the boundary is. And you can hone that. It's not fixed. The more you practice it, the better you get. So I like to teach people that there's a first person, kind of a perceptual position. There's a second person, which is being that other person and imagining what they're seeing, hearing, and feeling. And then there's even a third person, like you're an imaginary, invisible social worker who's just watching and paying attention to what's going on between the two people. So you can take any situation where there's a conflict, for example, and have them reimagine that they're in that conflict with that other person from those different points of view. And it gives them the practice to start to recognize that there are different ways to look at the same thing. Once they do that, and they reintegrate those understandings back into the present moment, then they're usually going to say that they feel a little differently about it. And it's because they've expanded their experience into things that they didn't normally do. So parts of their neurons are firing different ways, and they're accessing different portions of their being. So then you can start to get them to recognize what's going on in their body in that present first person point of view. You can say, you know, how do you know that you feel X, whatever X means, anger or sad or violated or whatever. And where in your body do you feel that? Because we have a somatic neurological response that's keyed in and connected to anything that we describe. So by searching that out, they can begin to start to have more of a language to describe and more of subtle, nuanced distinctions that they can begin to use to start to identify where their boundaries are, what's comfortable. They can start to see that what their mother says to them or does to them might have a different level of closeness than, say, a person off the street, right? We give people permission differently, even personal space. If I'm on a bus, for example, I'm not comfortable if someone's leaning on me, but you know, if my close best friend or girlfriend or my mom or my sister leans on me, I love it. So we have these different conditions under which those boundaries are true. And by discovering those things or asking the right questions and exploring them, you can teach them how to do that. And you'll just have to kind of, you know, remember what it was like to be their age and try to think of the simple ways to describe that.
Thank you so much. That actually really is helpful. And I think
Good.
it would help me implement it at my work, but thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, if you need more, any of you guys who are asking questions would like more details and things like that, feel free to reach out to me. You'll be getting an email with my contact information. So I'm happy to continue on these conversation, these little questions and stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Carlos. I know we are at time this afternoon, but all your information was very, very helpful. I am looking forward for many, many other future events with you to continue this conversation. But thank you everyone for joining us today. It was definitely a pleasure to have you all this afternoon and giving your time to hear Carlos out. This will conclude our workshop for today, but we will be sending over again the recording of this afternoon, and we will be sending in the email that you all registered under his podcast, his YouTube channel, his website, any information that will help you out if you guys want to go ahead and also meet with Carlos in his business adventure. So please just, be on the lookout for that. But I definitely want to, again, take the time for Carlos for bringing your expertise to our community at Cal Poly Pomona.
Cynthia, thank you so much for inviting me. And it was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and with everyone that participated. And thank you for everyone who had the courage to ask questions. I love that, and it makes me feel more connected to you. So thanks for that. And I appreciate all of you.
All righty, folks. Have a great evening. Stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, y'all.